You're live.
Okay, all right. Thanks for setting me up.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, guys. Okay, we're now for actually we're right on course here. Okay, we're talking about the reconquest of the Pacific after having discussed the turning points last week. Okay, sorry about the clutter down here. This is my basement office. Okay, I do some writing and some filing and everything else on here. So that's what this is all about. Okay, but at any rate, get that out of the way. All right, won't have the interruptions in the phone and everything else we had before. I wanted to mention something about the Pacific War, okay, all right, at the onset. And it basically deals with the notion that there's a lot more of a racial element to this war than there was in the war in Europe. A lot of German Americans. I'm mostly German in my heritage, okay, all right? So I don't have any antipathy toward the Germans, okay, all right? Not that I have an antipathy toward any other racial group, but the idea is that Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. People saw the Japanese as nefarious. They saw them as backstabbing, okay, all right? And there's a racial element to the war, racism element, if you want to say it that way, that's absent in the war in Europe. Look at some of these political cartoons. Now, this is my way of showing you overheads. I don't expect it to work very well, okay? But in this political cartoon right here, the Japanese are depicted as monkeys swinging through the jungles. This was seen in a lot of newspapers at the time. This one's a little clearer because it's in color, okay? The cover of a magazine called Collier's, and the Japanese were seen as a bat coming in to attack and just to cause issues, okay? All right? So at any rate, guys, okay, do you think this will factor in when we drop the atomic bomb or not? It might, okay? It might, all right? So there's a racial element here that needs to be considered, okay, during the course of this war. Well, what we're looking at now, okay, is the beginning of the reconquest of the Pacific. And I always like you to have your handout maps in front of you because it makes it so much easier doing that. And I keep turning around here, but I need to get the materials I have. Right. One of the things I want to start in with while you're getting your map, if you want. Okay, some announcements here. If you ever need to see your grades, okay, just ask me on email. I'll be happy to send back the grades I have for you. Okay, all right. Remember, I don't do a statistical averages here. Okay, all right. I kind of get it with a kind of an average that. I don't want to say it's a gut feeling, but it's basically an average of merit based upon what you've earned with your letter grades, okay? And it's kind of an intuitive thing, all right? And I've always done it that way. So at any rate, that's one thing, let me know. All right, second thing, okay, all right, did everyone get the handout, the reading handout, that big packet I sent, okay, because I want to delete that from my computer, all right? So if you didn't get that, let me know. You should have received by now, a week ago, okay, a full reading packet on the War in the Pacific, which will be very helpful for you understanding this stuff. Third thing, okay, all right, yes. 7 of you still haven't turned in your book reviews. They were due April 1st, okay? I'm going to give you a grace period until the 10th, which would be Friday, okay? All right? After that, they'll be marked late, okay? Across your letter grade, so just understand that, all right? There's still one person didn't do their BB report, okay? So that's your issue. But again, any questions, let me know. Now, by now you've got your handouts in front of you. And the way I'm going to approach this first is discuss how you defend an empire based on water, the Pacific Ocean. You see the perimeter of the Japanese Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere. How do you defend something like that? Well, basically, the approach taken, for better or worse, was to establish an outer perimeter. That's that line you see. Okay, I have to gesture the way you would see it. This way, around the Pacific, okay, all right, encompassing their conquests, all right, and if anybody pierces that outer perimeter by taking an island or two, that sort of thing, okay, all right, they can then send out massive response with their what they call their combined fleet, which is basically the Imperial Japanese Navy, all right, which again outnumbers the American Navy at this point in time. Remember that, okay? That'll change by about 1944, late 43. That all changes, definitely 44. So at any rate, all right, what they'll do is send out from their main bases in the interior attack forces to defeat those people, defeat the Americans taking certain islands or certain bases, whatever they might be. The main Japanese bases would be Formosa off the coast of China, now Taiwan, Okay, another one would be in Rabaul in the South Pacific. Okay, north of the Solomon Islands. Okay, just off the coast of New Guinea. Okay, there's a massive one in Micronesia and Truk in the Caroline Islands. We're going to talk about that one today in effect. So, in piercing the outer perimeter, okay, what you need to do then is a tactic called island hopping. Now, this is developed in part by the Admiral Chester Nimitz, okay, one of the most brilliant naval minds in American history, all right? He says we don't have to take every single island garrisoned by Japanese troops. We take the ones that have airstrips and anchorages. That's first priority. Second priority is this. We can bomb it into submission. You're not going to have the Japanese submit. I can't use that word. All right, you're going to bomb it into oblivion. All you have left are maybe men on the island left. They have no air support. They have no ships to supply them. All right, and move on to the next island. So you can literally kind of leapfrog your way across the Pacific. You're here, bomb this island, take this one. Bomb this one, take this one. All right, that's the tactic they're going to use in island hopping. Now, frankly, we'll talk about it more next week, but Douglas MacArthur is going to use a similar tactic by leapfrogging up the coast of New Guinea. He's not going to land at every strong point and that sort of thing. All right? This is going to mean at the end of the war, and I may say this again, there's some 300,000 Japanese soldiers left on the islands in the Pacific, okay, that were basically, they never saw an invasion, okay, but we're going to bring them home too. We have a fleet that's going to send out 1945, 46, 47 and bring these guys home back to Japan. It's an amazing story when you think about it. It's actually a great example of American largesse too. The fact that even a defeated enemy, we don't stomp them down. Okay, we help them back up. All right. So let's talk about the reconquest of the Pacific. First of all, I plan to highlight certain invasion islands, okay, certain objective strong points, all right? And the first one I'm going to talk about today is going to be Tarawa. That's where we pierce the outer perimeter of the Japanese Empire. Then I'm going to move into the bombing of Truk and the Carolines. I'm going to hit then the Marianas, okay? And I'm going to talk about an island that may not need to have been taken, and it was a bloodbath. Okay, the island of Peleliu and the Palau Islands off the coast of, not all directly off the coast, but between the Marianas and the Philippines. I'm going to get into the controversy too. Did we need to go after the Philippines? Now the Philippines will be next week's lecture. I'll be talking about Battle of Leyte Gulf, okay, talking about the invasions of Okinawa, Iwo Jima and Okinawa, and also to the route used by MacArthur moving up through the South Pacific. So, if you have that, if you've seen that big handout packet I sent out, okay, all right, in that you'll see a map, okay. I don't know if you printed it out or not. It's up to you, okay. But one of the maps describes the two routes across the Pacific, the Central Pacific route and the South Pacific route. Now, the South Pacific route is going to be MacArthur. He's going to move from Guadalcanal up through the Solomon Island chain, ultimately working his way toward the Philippines. Okay, that's his prize. He wants the Philippines back. Remember, I shall return. The other one is the Central Pacific route, and that's going to be under Nimitz, the island hopping campaign. So, let me show you another. I'm looking for a place to rest my coffee here. Okay, let me show you another, okay, overhead that may be helpful. And again, I don't know if you can see it or not, but if you can, certainly would work. This is the identical map that you have, okay, in your handout packet. And look what we have here, okay? All right. We've got basically, hopefully it's the right way, yes, okay, that perimeter Japanese Empire, okay, all right? The islands we're going to be talking about today, I'm not going to keep referring to this map, so this is the first time we're going to use it, okay, is going to be Tarawa here, okay, all right, there we are right there, the Gilbert Islands, make a passing reference to the Marshalls, end up in the Marianas here, and also to the bombing of Truk in the Caroline Islands right there. They're the Marianas right there. So I don't expect you to be able to see it, but you can see on your map tracing it the way I'm doing it here. So basically, all right, I'm looking at this upside down. Gilbert's, Carolines, and Marshalls, those Marianas, those three areas right there. All right, Peleliu is going to be located in between the Philippines and Guam right there. Okay, now, again, I know the limitations here. All right. All right. What made the difference in attacking one island as opposed to another? And why would they go after something like Tarawa? Okay, well, Tarawa is part of as an atoll. An atoll is a Pacific coral reef. Okay, all right. And one of the things you're going to see here I got a plan for a desk when I do this again next week. Okay, right here in hands. This is a very difficult one to see. It's dark. Okay, the main island in the Tarawa Atoll is Batio. Now, that's the actual island that gets invaded. It's 2.5 miles long and about 700 yards wide. That's all it is. But look at it, right here. And I know you can see it because I can see it right there. This is the island. That's all it is. But there's an airstrip. Okay, an airstrip. That's the key. Okay, so we're going to go after them first because what we need is a jump-off point for the attack on the Marshall Islands. The Marshall Islands are the big prize. So let's talk about Operation Galvanic, okay, which is basically the invasion of the Tarawa Atoll. All right. General Keiji Shibasaki, defending general, said this: "1 million men can't take Tarawa." This guy had constructed a 3-foot seawall, okay, with underwater obstacles laced with barbed wire. He also had interlocking fields of machine gun fire from hidden bunkers and hidden pillboxes, okay, a pre-registered artillery spotting points. So in other words, if they fire a shell, they know it's going to land a particular point. If Marines have landed there, they can then hit that point. All right, it's got literally a marker. All right, also too, okay, mortar fire with interlocking fields there. Okay, spiked concrete blocks, many times tipped with explosives, and they would also create gaps between these blocks so that they're going to funnel the Marines into certain firing lanes. A spider pattern of connecting trenches. Okay, he had 14 tanks. He's laid out 3,000 mines. Okay, and he had nearly 5,000 Japanese Marines defending this island. I'm going to tell you the end first. 17 of them walked off the island alive. 17. Now there were also some Korean laborers there too. Okay, but that we're not counting that in the military casualties. Post-war analysis said this when they reviewed the defenses of Tarawa. All right, Tarawa's defenses were the best in the world. By the fall of 1943, Batio may have been the most heavily defended place on Earth. I actually have a map that I would have shown you in class. It'd be useless to show it here. The defensive bunkers on Tarawa. If you ever get a chance to look it up, it's Google it. It's unbelievable. Well, a couple of names now. Ray Spruance, a name you're going to hear more about. He commands the overall command of the Operation Galvanic. He's going to be in command of other areas in the Pacific as well. All right. Richmond Kelly Turner. He's going to command the 5th Amphibious Force. Holland M. Smith. Howland Mad Smith. He's going to command the landing force, which is basically comprised of the 2nd, 6th, and 8th Marines. Okay, now that doesn't mean Marine Division. It means Marine regiments. Okay, all right. Marines refer to themselves in terms of battalions, then regiments. So the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, 2-5. That's how they refer to themselves as. They very rarely call themselves by the 1st Marine Division. All right, but when that comes up, I'll be making reference to that as well. Okay, all right. The overall landing force has about 19,000 men to take this island. So we outnumber the Japanese probably 4-1, which is generally 3-1 is generally the accepted attack ratio, even wars dating back to the Civil War. You want to have a 3-1 advantage when you're on the offense. General Julian Smith commanded the 2nd Marine Division. Now those units, those Marine regiments come from the 2nd Marine Division, and the landing force is commanded by an interesting guy, Colonel David Shoup. David Shoup is going to be later on the commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps. This, guys, is a heroic story. So let's begin it. 87 Amtraks. Now, what are Amtraks? Okay, if you saw Saving Private Ryan, you see what's called Higgins boats with a landing ramp that drops down, and the Marines or the soldiers are exited from the face of it. Those they're used in the Pacific, but they're not as effective because you got a coral reef. You don't have coral reefs in the English Channel. Okay, all right, landing sites in Europe. All right, but you got to have a tractor type vehicle. Tractor tracks, okay, to get over the coral reef and then into the waters beyond, okay, all right. So they've developed an amphibious tractor called an Amtrak. That can carry about 20 Marines, okay. It's a 4-man crew and it's armed, okay, but they just jump over the side, okay, when they're going to offload. All right, so the Amtraks are heading in. 3,000 Marines were to be ashore in the first 30 minutes, pouring ashore. 6,000 by noon. They preceded it by an offshore bombardment that was about 3 days in length. Okay, so the planes are strafing the island. Heavy artillery from the battleships Maryland and Colorado. Maryland, by the way, was one at the Pearl Harbor. Okay, all right. Destroyers. Okay, can come in close to the beaches. Okay, they like them in particular. Okay, all right. The landings take place on November 20th, 1943. Tarawa will quickly become attaining legendary status in the history of the United States Marine Corps. Okay, Tarawa. The tide that failed, they expected the tide to be a high tide, moon tide, okay, things like this. There's a term for it, I can't think of it. But at any rate, carry the Amtraks and the Higgins boats coming in the fifth wave perhaps, okay? I think there was a fifth wave. They would go over the obstacles and then get the Marines closer to the beach. You don't want to land the Marines 100 yards out as they're trying to walk ashore in chest-deep water, 100 yards. Picture that, okay, a length of a football field, okay, or longer in some cases. They'll get slaughtered by the machine gun fire. Now, in the end of the day, post-war analysis said most men on Tarawa died on the landing beaches and inland, but not in the waters. But that's the image of Tarawa, the slaughter of the Marines coming ashore. Day one, okay, within an hour of the landing, this is what Shoup sent back to the headquarters back on the fleet offshore. Have landed, unusually heavy opposition, casualties 70%. Cannot hold. They can't imagine this. They sent in Sherman tanks, 6 of them. 4 of them went down in shell holes, okay, and sank, all right? By day 3, the Marines are still clinging to the seawall. They can't. If you raised your head above the seawall 3 feet high, okay, you had a 50% chance of living. So crossing over it, okay, to attack inland and take the airfield and things like that is a nigh impossible task, okay? They had to evacuate the wounded because, listen to these stats. If you were wounded, you had a 90% chance of survival if they got to you, the hospital ships got to you within 1 hour. Okay, if it was 8 hours later, it fell to 25% chance of survival. Even as that stands, 90 corpsmen and doctors were hit, killed, and wounded, attending to the wounded on the beaches of Basio. They're still not off the beaches yet. By 3 p.m. on day 3, okay, a shell burst killed Shibasaki. This is going to be prophetic because it's going to mean they don't launch a coordinated banzai charge or counterattack. There's at least one historian who suggested, okay, a Colonel Joseph Alexander in his book Utmost Savagery, which is a good read about the Battle of Tarawa, all right, that a banzai charge on that first night, second night, maybe even a third night would have succeeded and would have driven the Marines into the sea. They can't get off the beaches. By the end of the day, okay, and I'm still on day 1, by the way. I said day 2 and 3. I meant beach 2 and 3. I apologize. Major error. I'm still on day 1. Okay, all right. At the end of day 1, only 16 of the 87 Amtraks are still working. The rest are lying in rubble off the beaches. Listen to this quote from Colonel Alexander. Altogether, some 5,000 Marines stormed the beaches of Basio on D-Day. 1,500 of these were dead, wounded, or missing by nightfall. The survivors held less than a quarter of a mile of sand and coral. That's it. This is a a more atrocious bloodbath than I ever thought of. Again, I apologize suggesting that we're on day 3. We're not. They thought it would take 3 days, basically less than a day to take the island. Okay, it's going to take 76 hours of sustained combat. Okay, it's over 3 days. Correspondent Walter Sherrod said this: what we had won in a day of dreadful carnage, heroic endeavor, and selfless sacrifice is less than 1/10 of a square mile of stinking coral blown to useless bits and stained with the great drafts of American blood. Julian Smith, who was in one of the command regiments there, okay, said, issue in doubt. Can they even hold on to what they've taken? Nobody imagined this. Well, day 2. Now we're on day 2. Okay, all right. Basically, units have made it ashore. Some have crossed over the seawall. The seawall did have gaps in it. Okay, and they've cut the island in half by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They're going after the bunkers. They're going to use corkscrew and blowtorch methods. Basically, fire into the firing slits and then launch in flamethrowers or charges in there. That's going to be refined as the time goes on. I'm going to talk more about corkscrew and blowtorch when we get to Okinawa. By 4 p.m. on day 2, Colonel Shoup aboard the on the landing site now, okay, has issued a situation report which says casualties many, percentage dead. I'm sorry, casualties many, percentage dead unknown, combat efficiency, in capital letters, we are winning. I love that. It sends chills up and down my spine. Okay, 24 hours ago, issue in doubt. All right. Day 3 was spent clearing things out, different pockets of resistance. Okay, remember I said they cut the island in half. Okay, 3,000 Marines ashore, and there were only about 1,000 defenders left. On the night of the 22nd and 23rd, an estimated 1,000 Japanese launched their long-awaited banzai charge. Okay, the suicide charge to drive the Marines into the sea. They never worked. Okay, but at any rate, they continued attacking in 4 consecutive charges. By 5 a.m., the last of the charges has stopped. Okay, all right. The suicides begin. Remember, a Japanese soldier does not surrender. All right. So those in the bunkers that knew they couldn't get out, all right, would literally, being too graphic here, take their rifles, put the barrel in the mouth, and pull the trigger with their toes and blow their head off. Okay, rather than surrender and be disgraced and dishonored. Part of that Bushido samurai ethic. Day 4, the end of organized resistance occurs, is announced at 1:05 p.m. 76 hours of sustained combat. Okay, unrelenting. In the ensuing days, it would also take the rest of the atoll. They took Macon Island and the Gilberts and things like this. Final tally. 6,000 men died, some 4,000 to 5,000 Japanese, and 3,300 American Marines killed and wounded, okay, and missing. That's roughly, okay, 1,000 a day. The Japanese lose 99% of their men, all right, and the American Marines lose between 19 and 30% casualties. 4 medals of honor, but 300 medals for valor overall. 46 Navy crosses and 248 silver stars. 3 chaplains received medals of commendation for meritorious service under fire. Now, this is our first real invasion of Japanese-held beachfront. Now, remember, they landed on Guadalcanal without opposition. Okay, so what is this going to mean in terms of what lessons do we learn here? All right, amphibious assaults are possible against heavily defended beaches. We've landed, we've shed blood, but we won. All right. Secondly, U.S. forces have now penetrated the outer perimeter. We can expect a counterattack somewhere. Okay, that's coming up soon. Okay, all right. But we've pierced the outer perimeter, and we're 700 miles closer than we were a week earlier to the Japanese home islands. The air bases. Okay, we can use those air bases because then we can go after the Marshalls, and the Marshalls have like 8 air bases. We want that. They've also got good anchorages and things like that. The island of Kwajalein, Eniwetok, Roy, Namor. Okay, we can take those islands and use them for, basically stationary aircraft carriers. I talked about that in the last lecture. We need more Amtraks. This is a good way to go for amphibious landings. Okay, we need more of them. All right, we need more armor-piercing shells, because we need to have bunker buster shells. Okay, traditional artillery shells aren't working too well. We need, this is big, we need pre-attack demolition teams. They called them frogmen back in those days. What do they call them today? That's right, SEALs, Navy SEALs. We need these guys. We weren't calling them SEALs back then, but we need them to blast out the underwater obstacles, blast avenues through the coral reefs and things like this. They will come in the next lecture. You're going to next island. You're going to hear about them hitting the Marianas. Okay. The Taro vets went on to train other troops and landings and other islands in the Pacific and things like this. We've learned how to land on these islands and take them. So we begin our march to Japan. Okay. One more thing before I get to the Marianas now is I want to talk about the fleets. The American Navy did some remarkable innovation during the war. Now, I apologize if I talked about this last week. I wasn't sure if I did or not. But they developed fire control teams on board their ships. The Japanese never did this. You light up an aircraft carrier, we can fix the problem. They can't. Okay, all right? You know where they trained? They got the fire departments from New York City and Boston to train Navy men, okay, in terms of how to fight fires aboard ships. Secondly, we also created entire fleets of supplies. They didn't have any firepower per se. Okay, all right. They didn't have any landing troops, but they were purely supplies. So in other words, we could keep the main battle fleets, what they call the fast carrier groups, the task force. One of the most famous is Task Force 58. Keep them out at sea and keep them supplied rather than having them run all the way back to Pearl Harbor for more supplies. So we would have supply ships. We would have oil tankers, ammo ships, hospital ships, regular supplies, okay, food, okay, things like this, and we keep those fleets out at sea. These are remarkable innovations in the history of naval warfare, and we've done it. Next up, well, the Marshalls get hit. I don't spend a lot of time talking about the Marshalls. We land there, we take them, and we're now moving toward Japan even more closely. The battle the two biggest battles are Kwajalein and Uitak. Kwajalein is pretty big, okay, and we hit them early in 1944. We're worried about Truk Island, that main base in the Carolines, okay, all right. Well, that's going to get hit in February of 1944, okay? By the way, I got to give you this one. Kwajalein, one Marine with a funny sense of humor wrote, when we established bases on Kwajalein, okay, in the Marshalls, he wrote, okay, Kwajalein Atoll, there's a big sign, Kwajalein Atoll, elevation 8 feet, no whiskey atoll, no women atoll, and no nothing atoll on Kwajalein Atoll, okay? So a little combat humor there was probably kind of cool. All right, when the Caroline Islands were hit, okay, with 9 carriers, okay, we're building our fleets up over the course of 2 days of bombardment, the Japanese lost 270 planes, 51 ships, I'm sorry, 53, okay, all right, at over 4,500 men, we will lose no ships and 25 planes. All right, we lost basically 2 ships, they were damaged, okay, and they were repaired and sent back out. We lost 40 men, okay, total in the attack. That's 40 tragedies, but still, the price paid was we've neutralized an entire island group by hitting Truk Island. I recently heard some people pronounce it Truk, okay, it is what it is. All right, anyway, we bypass them and never have to hit them, which means now we can hit the Marianas, which we need to be able to hit. That's my next objective now. You can see now we're moving into the Central Pacific. Conquest of the Marianas means we can take our big B-29s and launch them on raids on the Japanese home islands. We thought we could do that from bases in China, but China's still in contest. The Second Sino-Japanese War is still going on, and it's really not feasible to launch them from there, okay? All right, so at any rate, if we take the Marianas, we've got 3 islands that can become the biggest airports, and they will, the biggest airports in the world, okay? Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. Once we do take them, I'm going to have the story again here. Once we do take them, okay, a Japanese advisor, he's an admiral, to the Japanese emperor said, hell is upon us. We're now going to be hit, okay, with air raids on the Japanese home islands. The B-29s are coming. And they will take off from these islands in the Pacific, from the Marianas Islands. So again, go to your map if you haven't got it out, okay, all right? After the lecture, okay, and you'll see where it's located. It's now within bomber range of Japan. Sure, it's like a 6-hour flight, but still they can do it, okay? All right. Saipan was the first one and the bloodiest of the 3. It's called Operation Forager, okay, all right? The 4th Marine Division landed there, but the 2nd Marine Division and also to the Army 27th Infantry Division are going to land there. This is where they use the UDT, the underwater demolition teams, the frogmen. Okay, they go in at night stealthily before the invasion, and they will basically map out the defenses and things like this, but also too, okay, they have the capacity to, once the invasion's about to start, to blow gaps in the coral reef and everything else like that. The Japanese, there's a garrison here of between 15,000 and 18,000 Japanese soldiers, but what's also important is there are 25,000 civilians on these islands. The Marianas were islands that used to be owned by Germany, okay, and because of the UN mandate system, okay, Japan kind of inherited them after World War I. We talked about this earlier. They've been building defenses on these islands for a long time. Okay, all right. There's the theory that Amelia Earhart flew over these islands and might have seen the Japanese defenses being built. She might even have landed there. Okay, that's totally unproven. We have no idea. Okay, there is a grainy photograph of a woman like her standing on a dock somewhere, okay, in the Marianas, but it's not been proven. Anyway, D-Day is June 15th, 1944, 8:43 a.m. They're going to land, the Marines are going to land on a 4-mile stretch of beaches, 11 designated landing beaches. Okay, 600 Amtraks now. Okay, 8,000 Marines ashore in the first 20 minutes. Get over the coral reef, get through it, and get them ashore. Okay, all right. They've also taken landing craft and made them into rocket boats. Some of these old Higgins boats now carry rockets and fire support. Okay, guns. Okay, things like this. All right. So they're coming ashore on Saipan. The Battle of Saipan. All right, let me just talk about this. The new type of tank that's used here, the M3A1 Sherman tanks were equipped with flamethrowers. Okay, the Japanese will call these Satan tanks. Okay, this is gonna be instrumental in rooting the Japanese out of the caves and things like that. Okay, all right. 3 a.m. on the first night they're ashore. Okay, all right. Early morning of the 16th. Okay, the Japanese general there, okay, is going to try to launch a nighttime banzai charge. He's actually going to involve tanks. It's going to be the biggest tank attack of the war. But what saves the day, they're going to hit the airfield first, try to regain that. There's 5 Marine tanks in a tank battalion, okay, that fend off this attack. They're unbelievable. Flamethrowing, regular conventional firing tanks, etc. Okay, all right, and by July 9, okay, July 9 now, June 15th, July 9, the island's secure. They've swept up the island, taken it. All right, I want to give you a couple other stories here too, though. Okay, one is what's the death cult. Now, we've seen where Japanese troops commit suicide; they fight to the end. What about civilians? Civilians are expected to do this too. Fight and die for the emperor. Okay, they would give them. Some of the guys in the banzai charge were found to have bamboo sticks, and that's all, sharpened bamboo sticks. You might find women carrying satchel charges and would detonate themselves. Some of the Japanese found it justifiable to use civilian shields in their attacks and things like this. File us away. There's going to be a horror story at the end of the Battle of Saipan. All right. This is also the first appearance of the Navajo Code Talkers. Now, I'm going to talk about them later on, okay? Actually, I'm reading a memoir now of a guy named Nez, who was one of the last, he is the last code talker to remain alive. I don't know if he's still alive with us today, but at any rate, he was it. They also, too, okay, all right, that final banzai charge was on July 7th, okay? 3,000 Japanese, 1/3 of them had homemade spears. Okay, all right. They actually broke through the line. Some of the wounded soldiers, Japanese soldiers, were attacking when they were on crutches. Okay, so this shows you the death cult mentality. Well, let's apply that now to the civilians. The island is taken. It's declared secure on July 9. Let me read you a passage here about what happens next. The final horror occurred after the fighting was over. At the northern tip of Saipan lie Marpai Point, a plateau 833 feet above a maze of jagged coral rocks, and there hundreds of Japanese civilians joined the few remaining troops in an orgy of self-destruction. Despite loudspeaker assurances that the victims would treat their captives well, parents threw their children off the cliffs and jumped after them. Whole families waded and swam out to sea to drown themselves. One group of 100 Japanese bowed to Marines watching them from a cliff. Then they stripped, bathed, donned fresh clothing, and spread a Japanese flag on the rock. And one man distributed hand grenades, and one by one they pulled the pins as they held the grenades to their bellies. Incomprehensible. Okay, but is this what it's going to be like when we have to invade Japan? Is there going to be one mass death cult, one mass banzai charge, one mass suicide ritual? Well, let's consider that down the road, and when it comes to dropping that bomb. Well, where was that Japanese fleet? Yeah, they did show up. They did attack. Okay, all right, but it was called. It's going to result in, all right, an event called the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Here we are. It's a general, an admiral by the name of Ozawa. You're going to hear his name again in the Battle of Leyte Gulf next week. The United States had a 2-to-1 air superiority because of our carriers versus theirs. Okay, all right. But the Japanese planes actually had a longer flight range. Okay, the number of Japanese carriers, 5 carriers plus 4 light carriers, total of 9 overall. Okay, all right, and also 7 battleships. All right, 5 battleships. Excuse me, 7 cruisers, 34 destroyers, and 6 oilers. All right, so they're coming. Okay, all right, everybody knows it. All right, so Ray Spruance and the boys, okay, pick up the Japanese fleet. They spot them on June 19th. Okay, this is 4 days after the landing now, so I'm going back a little bit because it's a separate engagement. Okay, about 1:15 a.m. They're 500 miles west of Guam. All right, what do we have here now? Okay, Ozawa launches his first airstrike. He loses half his planes. He launches a second strike. He loses 99 out of 130 planes. He launched his 4th airstrike. I don't know how many days on the 3rd. 4th airstrike with 82 planes. Only 9 of them returned. This is called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. We're going to shoot out of the sky over 300 Japanese planes in a single engagement. This is the end of the Japanese Air Corps. All they have left now are going to be planes that are going to be basically suiciders. And they're going to start to appear later this year of 1944. Carriers. The carrier Taiho was sunk with a loss of 1,600 men, torpedoed by a submarine. All right, another submarine took the Shokaku out, and she sinks with the loss of 1,200. All right, the Zukaku was set on fire. These are all carriers, okay, except the Taiho, which were used at Pearl Harbor. Okay, all right. The escort carriers Ryuhu and Hiyu are going to be sunk as well. Okay, the Japanese are going to lose a total of 3 carriers. Okay, yeah, I don't know if the Ryuhu and the Hiyu went down. We're going to have the carriers there: the Yorktown, the Hornet, the Enterprise. Okay, some familiar names here. Yeah, the Yorktown went down at Midway, but this is a new Yorktown. They built a new one and renamed it. All right, I want to talk about one guy. Alex Vraciu. Now, I don't know if I'm spelling his name right, but Vraciu. You may want to Google him, okay? This guy became an ace. 5 planes took to be an ace. An ace in 1 patrol. Shot down at least 5 Japanese planes. He will shoot down 19 overall, and he'll still remain number 4 today on the Marine U.S. Navy ace list. Well, Mark Mitcher was commanding the carriers. And he wanted to chase after those Japanese fleet, the remnants of the Japanese fleet as they begin to retire. It's getting to be late in the day, 5, 6 o'clock at night, and he sends his planes out with everything he's got. He knows they're going to come back in the dark. Now, this to me, this almost brings tears to my eyes. This is one of the most, it's been called the most heroic decision made during the war. If you're an American aircraft carrier commander, you do not allow your carrier to be lit at night with anything from a cigarette to a spotlight. Okay, so there's no landing lights or anything because they're afraid of Japanese torpedoes. We can't afford to lose carriers. Planes we can replace, they're a dime a dozen. And we can fish the men out of the water, maybe, if they have to ditch. Well, Mitcher launches this strike knowing that they're not going to have enough fuel to get back. They take off, undaunted. They hit the remnants of the Japanese fleet. Okay, all right. They'll do some damage. You won't finish it off. Okay, but then they got to struggle to make it back, and they're coming back in pitch darkness now. A signal goes out to all the radios. I'm going to read it to you directly. Bald Eagle, this is Blue Jacket himself. Turn on the lights. They lit those carriers up like it was the 4th of July. Okay, all right. MacArthur once said, it's the orders that you disobey that put you in the history books. Mark Mitcher we know of because of this moment, okay? They got 77% of the planes, okay, back on the carriers because of that decision. They could have been torpedoed, but they weren't, okay? He was lucky, I'll admit, okay? But still, it was a significant decision he made, okay? Now, the Japanese are going to lose 3 carriers and between 346 and 476 planes. I can't account for the differences. You know the problems here. All right, U.S. lost 17 planes. enemy action, 200 planes. Okay, we're still, well, I don't get into that. I was going to say that before they turned on the lights. Japanese lost its air force. Within 4 months, they'll be resorting to suicide tactics, as I described as well. Guam and Tinian were also hit. The fighting was less difficult, but on Guam there is a story. Massive banzai charge to drive the Marines into the sea. Okay, it was secured after 22 days of combat. Okay, all right, and casualties. 18,000 Japanese are lost there on that island. And they really don't put up a great fight. Banzai charge is a great fight, no question, okay? But they could have defended that island better, could have inflicted more casualties. We lose, okay, about 7,000 men, 1,400 killed. In your handout packet is the story of Sergeant Yayoi. I'm not going to tell you his story. Read it, okay? All right, he was on Guam. Another guy, if you have any Giants fans out there, okay? All right, first of all, I feel sorry for you. But anyway, all right, Charlie Connolly, quarterback for the Giants for years, okay, all right. He was a Marine fighting on Guam. Okay, he was headed off to Iwo Jima. They called his ship back because they still had mop-up, last remnants of Japanese still on the island of Guam, even after it was declared secure. So Charlie Connolly fought there. Tinian was taken, and very soon they're going to be some of the biggest airports in the world, and they are within fighter range of Japan. I'm sorry, bomber range of Japan. Now, I haven't spoken a lot about MacArthur's southern wing, his southern tier, his southern offensive. We're going to get to that next week, okay? All right? But as he's approaching the Philippines, and he's scheduled to hit there in the fall of 1944, let's get the strategic picture. We've now taken the Pacific to the point of the Marianas taken, bomber range. We're halfway there, okay? All right? Meanwhile, in the southern tier, they're going to sweep up into the Philippines. So there's a big debate about whether they should bypass the Philippines and also go after Formosa, the big Japanese naval base there. I remember, I thought like 14 airfields. Don't quote me on it, but something like that. Okay, all right, plus a huge anchorage. It's a big island. All right, it's the nation of Taiwan. All right, at any rate, the debate was raging. I think finally Nimitz came around to agreeing with MacArthur we need to hit the Philippines. There's a lot of Japanese soldiers in the Philippines, okay, and also too the airfields there were necessary, the anchorage, and also too we owed something to the Filipino people. They've conducted a kind of resistance operation throughout the war and have taken hits. Okay, they fought valiantly. So we're going to talk about that next class, okay, but if you look at the Marianas and you look at the Philippines, in between is the island of Peleliu and the Palau Islands, all right? At the end of the day, the conquest of Peleliu is going to mean nothing. It's not going to contribute to the war effort in any way, but Peleliu becomes its own story in its own way. Operation Stalemate 2, part of Operation Forager. At any rate, all right, it's 500 miles east of the Philippines. There are 11,000 Japanese defenders, also some Korean workers. And here's the deal. They are embedded in this island. When the Marines would land on an island, there's two options. Either let them take them ashore and then hit them when they're all crammed on the beaches. They're going to use that at Okinawa and at Iwo Jima. They're going to use it here in Peleliu. They used it in Biak, a small little island. Okay, all right, but the other option is to defeat them on the beaches. Well, that's shown it hasn't worked. They tried it at Tarawa. Okay, it didn't work there. Okay, all right. So at any rate, we're going to he's going to basically dig in, allow them to land. Okay, and then fight them from day one and start create a defense in depth. Okay, a line of defense followed by a second line of defense for reinforcement purposes. All right. This is the first Pacific battle in which, quote, the Japanese did not resort to foolish banzai charges, but rather holed up in caves and pillboxes with reinforced concrete and coral, reinforced concrete steel doors in some of these caves too. Nearly 200 caves, another source said 500 of them, okay, with interconnected tunnels and things like this. This becomes a model for the defenses of Iwo Jima and of Okinawa. So remember it down the road. Okay, they want to launch a war of attrition, make the war so costly that maybe the Americans will be brought to the negotiating table here. The conquest was expected to be done in 4 days. It's going to take 73. Operation Stalemate 2, the preparatory bombardment, involves 6,000 tons of shells and 800 tons of bombs from 5 battleships, 5 heavy cruisers, 3 light cruisers, 14 destroyers, okay, and between 7 and 11 carriers, okay, all right. Another one says a total of 19, so it's whether you count those escort carriers, the smaller ones or not, okay. First Marines are under one of the most famous of the Marine commanders, Colonel Lewis Chesty Puller. I talked about him before last class. Okay, he's here. He's going to get a hit on his reputation here too. He's going to launch suicidal attacks that's going to basically cost a lot of Marine lives. Okay, and this is something that he'll be held accountable for later on. All right, the landings takes place on September 15th, 1944. Okay, 1,800 Marines from the 1st Marine Division landed at 8:32 in the morning. All right, the Marines race to take the high ground. They're going to take Bloody Nose Ridge, all right, things like this, okay? But within 1 hour of the landing, 60 landing have been destroyed. So the Japanese are contesting this. They're not letting them land per se. You know, there's another dimension to this too. There's no water in this island. The Japanese defenders had to rely upon rainfall and cisterns collecting the rainwater, right? We initially sent in old oil drums emptied of their oil and hopefully scoured clean to have water in them. The water was rancid. You couldn't even drink this stuff. So guys were going to be dropping with heat exhaustion and everything else, okay? Just another dimension to the war in the Pacific we don't even think of here, okay? There's another place on the island called The Point, okay, all right, which you'll be taking and things like this. So they're going for the high ground. But the true high ground here is a place called the Umerbrigal Ridge. And this is basically 500 by 1,000 yards, okay, honeycombed and impregnable. Listen to this reading. First, they dropped high explosives from aircraft and shells from battleships. Next, they ignited flamethrowers into cave openings, followed by grenade, corkscrew, and blowtorch. Right? Then they attacked with machine guns and pistols. After that, they called in napalm drops. First use of napalm in the Pacific War. All right, waited for the jellied gasoline to seep into the porous rocky ground and ignited it, and into the caves below, then ignited it with phosphorus mortar rounds. This is a scene from hell, okay, all right? When all else failed, they simply sealed the cave shut with bulldozers and dynamite, trapping the Japanese soldiers inside. One cave contained an estimated 1,000 Japanese corpses when they later investigated. By D+7, all the initial objectives have been reached, okay, but at the cost of 3,946 Marine lives, and the fight for Umerbrigal Ridge continues. The 1st Marine Division is going to take 56% casualties, half. The 1st Battalion, the 1st Marines, the 1-1, takes Hill 100 but loses 71% of its men. Chesty Puller's men, 70%. 1,749 men, okay? E.B. Sledge. One of you emailed me about reading the book, The Pacific. I salute you. That's a great call. Or watching the movie, rather. E.B. Sledge is going to be in there, okay? All right? He wrote a book called With the Old Breed. He had a couple of things to say about this. He said, the Japanese couldn't hope to drive us off or to even be reinforced. They killed solely for the sake of killing, without hope and without higher purpose. He later became a college professor. You know what he said at his interview? He's a former Marine in the Pacific, and the interviewing administrator says to him, "Sir, what qualifications, what did you do before the war?" He looked her in the eye and said, "I killed people." That's kind of cold, okay? But at any rate, I think somebody said that's in that movie. I never saw it. I read the book, The Pacific. By the 15th of October, the 5th Marines have lost 49% of their men. But they're starting to build even a new airstrip. They captured the first one on September 26th, about 11 days after the landing. Okay, and now by October 1st, they built another 6,000 foot airstrip. Okay, all right. The island was finally declared secure on November 27th. 34 Japanese holdouts held on until 1947. Numbers. Okay, 1,600 Americans died on Peleliu. The Japanese, we don't know. All but 19 died. 19 walked off this island alive, all wounded. 1st Marine Division suffered 1/3 casualties. 81st Infantry Division lost 3,300, or out of 9,800, 1/3 casualties, okay? 8 Medals of Honor were issued, 16 million rounds of ammunition, and 116,000 grenades were used to subdue the island of Peleliu. You might not even heard of this island, okay, all right? So I was happy to hit this because it is a story in heroism here, no question. Here's an interesting quote now from Sledge again, okay? None of us would ever be the same after what we endured. Something in me died at Peleliu. Perhaps it was the childish innocence that I accepted as a faith, the claim that a man is basically good. Possibly I lost faith that the politicians in high places, who would not have to endure the war's savagery, will ever stop blundering and sending others in to endure it. War, he meant. There was an article in Archaeology magazine. Okay, I don't read a lot of magazines, but I've always had an interest in archaeology. Anyway, if I had to do it over again, I might have a minor in archaeology. But anyway, in the magazine, they actually went back to Peleliu. Okay, our research team. This is in a recent edition, came out last summer. This is what they found. Archaeologically, the island is the best preserved battlefield of the Pacific War. Archaeologists entered the caves and found, quote, charred bones and bits of uniform, along with personal items such as chopsticks, sake bottles, eyeglasses, belt buckles, and buttons embossed with the Imperial Japanese naval insignia. This is written a year and a half ago. There is a lingering smell of burned hair. These caves are too horrible to be in for even a few minutes. The stench is horrible. That's what's left on Peleliu. Nobody ever goes there. All right, guys. Wraps it up for today. I'm going to see you next week. Okay, let's see you. Okay, I'll talk to you next week about Okinawa and Iwo Jima, and also, too, the Battle of Leyte Gulf and the conquest of the Philippines. Okay? Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're safe and well. Okay? Remember social distancing, and we're remaining in our isolationism. Okay? Talk to you again.